There are monsters that don't hide under your bed. They carry your last name. They smile in family photos. They say kind things to the neighbors. And they're the ones who pour your milk before bedtime. My name is Clara Mae Whitmore, 74 years old. I live in Windermere, a small town where the summers feel like honey poured from the sky, and winters settle into your bones like regret. Folks around here call me Pie Lady Clara. I bring apple pies to church every Sunday. But no one knows. Those pies are baked from silence. A silence that's clung to me for more than 60 years. I'm not telling this story to be pitied. I tell it because somewhere out there, there might be a little girl just like I was, curled up on a staircase in the dark, asking herself, will anyone believe me? I was born into an ordinary family. My mother, Margaret, worked the night shift as a nurse. She labored endlessly to raise me. My biological father died when I was 3. I don't remember his face. When I turned 7, my mother remarried. His name was Victor Granger, a quiet man, deep voice, polite manners. He was the kind of man people said yes, sir to. But behind that pleasant voice was a darkness I would come to live with for the rest of my childhood. I still remember the heavy summer nights when my mother was away on her night shifts. It was just me in that creaky old house. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway. The door to my room never squeaked. Because he had oiled the hinges, everything was planned. And each time, I told myself, maybe this time he'll just look and leave. But he never just looked. The years that followed, there were no screams, no bruises where anyone could see them, only silence thick as glue, sealing my throat every time I stepped through the front door. I lived in 2 worlds. By day, I was little Clara, neat in her school uniform, always saying thank you and sorry. I got good grades. I was polite. The kids at school called me the perfect girl. By night, I was a shadow, a child curled by the window, listening for the slightest sound. The soft click of the door, the slow drag of slippers on wooden floors, the weight of breath soaked in stale tobacco and beer. I used to think, if I were better, if I studied harder, if I cleaned faster, maybe he'd stop. But evil doesn't care how good you are. Once, I tried to tell my mother, in the only way a child who doesn't know how to name her pain can. I said, I don't like when Daddy Victor hugs me too long. She chuckled gently, patted my head, and said, oh, Clara, you're imagining things. He just loves you. That night, I learned my first lesson. When people refuse to see, you can scream until your voice breaks, and they'll still be blind. There was a tiny space under the staircase, cramped, dusty, where I often hid when he walked around the house looking for me. I'd sit there clutching a torn-eared teddy bear, feeling my heart pound so loud it hurt. I prayed not to go, but to my mother, please, come home early. But she usually came home late, and every time she opened the door, that hospital antiseptic smell rushed in, like safety arriving just a little too late. The winter I turned 9, I thought about running away for the first time. I planned to slip out the back door, follow the line of hedges, and make it to Mrs. Jones's house, the neighbor who gave me ginger cookies every Friday. But as I reached the door, I saw his silhouette, standing still in the kitchen light, as if he had been waiting. I turned back to my bed. That night, he didn't touch me. He just sat beside me, stroked my hair, and whispered, you're special. Don't tell anyone. They wouldn't believe you. And the strange thing is, I believed him. I grew up inside that darkness, learning to hide my tears, to smile when necessary, to carry secrets like they were part of my body. But what I never learned was how to forgive myself for being silent, for nodding when he said, just this one last time. That June. The air was thick and suffocating. The sun poured down with a kind of harshness, and the heat inside the house felt like someone had shut every window on my soul. I remember the day so clearly, because it was my 11th birthday. There were no cakes, no candles. Mom was working a night shift. He didn't say a word all morning. Just nodded once when I set his fried eggs on the table. I didn't expect anything. I had learned not to. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I was doing the dishes, hands sunk in soapy water, eyes on the kitchen always watching, always waiting for where he might show up next. The knock came again, Louder. I didn't even get to dry my hands before the door opened. And there she was, like a breeze sweeping into a stifling room. Aunt Eva, my mother's cousin, a city woman, hair softly curled, red lipstick, and a faint scent of jasmine, a fragrance that still makes my heart stir. Even now, where's my little Clara? She beamed. I hadn't answered yet when he appeared, that familiar twisted smile crawling onto his wooden face. Margaret's working nights again, he said, voice unusually warm. You're welcome to come in for some tea. I saw her eyes flick from me to him. Then around the house, something in her gaze shifted, a quiet suspicion. Perhaps. She nodded. Tea sounds nice, but I came here to see Clara. He paused. Just for a second, and so did I. I'm fine, I stammered. But she had already taken my hand, gentle, steady. I just want to take you for some ice cream. Birthday girls deserve a little sweetness. I looked over at him. He smiled that same awful smile that made my stomach churn. Go on, then. Just be back before dinner. Her car smelled of peppermint. I sat in the back seat, hands clenched, heart racing. She didn't ask questions at first, just turned on the radio low, letting some soft classical music float between us, as if she was giving me space to breathe. We sat together at the town's little ice cream shop. I chose vanilla, like I always did. She picked strawberry bright and bold, like her lipstick. Still like to draw? She asked gently. I nodded. I still have that drawing you gave me last year. She smiled. The tree with the bird's nest. I loved it. I don't know why, but my throat tightened. And a question escaped before I could stop it. Aunt Eva, do you believe bad things can happen in houses that look perfect? She didn't answer right away. She looked at me, really looked, and her eyes said more than words ever could. Finally, she replied, I believe that sometimes the prettiest houses have the darkest corners. But if you tell me, Clara, I promise, I'll turn on the light. I didn't tell her right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid. The truth is the heaviest thing a child can hold. It's sharp, and it cuts through everything, even fragile things like a mother's belief. Aunt Eva came back a few days later, carrying a box of watercolors and an umbrella with cherry blossoms on it. We sat under the old pear tree in the backyard. She spread out a checkered cloth, poured us lemonade, and said, we don't have to talk today. If you're not ready, we can just paint. We painted together every afternoon for a week, in silence. I drew birds with no nests, trees with no shade. She never asked questions, but she saw, and little by little, the blank spaces in my sketches started to fill with things I had never dared to name. Then one afternoon, a storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled far away. I was painting the eyes of a little fox, when suddenly the tears came. Not loud, not frantic, just quiet. And I whispered 3 words. He touched me. She didn't hug me. She just took my hand in both of hers, firm and steady. Thank you for being brave, she said, voice as steady as her grip. Now it's my turn. That night, she called my mother. I didn't hear the call, but I remember the look on my mother's face when she came into my room afterward. Not angry, not crying, just pale, one hand gripping her purse strap, the other hanging as if she had just dropped something she couldn't pick up again. We need to talk, she said, her eyes never leaving mine. Her voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't warm either. I nodded. Every explanation I had prepared vanished from my head, and she looked like she didn't know what to believe. Victor says you imagine things, that you need help. But Eva says, you've changed. You're not the same Clara you used to be. I didn't speak, just looked at her, hoping she could see the things in my eyes that words would never say. Then she knelt in front of me and whispered, I'll ask only once. Tell me the truth, even if it breaks my heart. Did Victor do something to make you afraid? I nodded, and at that moment, I saw her collapse, not because she didn't believe me, but because she did. Victor left the house the next morning. No one said a word, no tears, no yelling, just absence. But he left behind something heavier than his presence. Silence. My mother didn't look at me for days. She went to work, came home, cooked, cleaned, like a ghost moving through rooms that used to be filled with meaning. I understood. She needed time. So did I. I began to write. Not to tell anyone, but to survive. I wrote on scraps of paper torn from my school notebooks, with a blue ink pen Mom had left on the bookshelf. At night, under the small bedside lamp, on the same creaky wooden bed I used to fear falling asleep in. The first lines trembled as much as my hands did. Dear Mom. Then I stopped. Changed it to, Dear Clara. I was writing to myself. I wrote about the kitchen, its smell of bleach and sweat. About his rough hands and the way he whispered as if it was normal. About my mother's eyes, unsure where to look the day I told her the truth. And I wrote, like each sentence was a kind of hug I never received. Aunt Eva once told me, there are wounds that can only be released when turned into words. Even if those words are never spoken out loud, I hid those letters in an old pencil case beneath my bed. No one read them. No one knew. But to me, they were the first sign that I wasn't voiceless anymore. Each night, after I finished writing, I would read a line to myself, not to fall asleep, but to remind myself, I'm still here. I'm still alive. And I've taken my first step out of the dark. One afternoon, while I was folding one of the letters, Mom walked into the room. She didn't say anything, just looked at me for a long time, as if searching for the daughter she had lost along the way. Then she said, softly, could you read it to me? I didn't answer. My hands were trembling, my throat dry like paper. But I opened the letter, and I read. My voice was barely above a whisper. But she stayed. She listened, as if hearing stories she had never dared to face. When I finished, she embraced me. For the first time, fully. No hesitation, no distance. Just two women, one older, one still growing, trying to heal each other with truth. I kept writing, no longer hiding pages under my pillow or beneath the bed. I pinned them on the walls of my room, like patches of memory sewn back together with ink and bravery. Mom stopped avoiding them. She started reading a little at a time. Some days, she paused halfway through and wiped her tears with a sleeve. Other times, she just nodded, letting me know she was still there. I don't know when it happened, but writing became my second breath. Not just to retell the pain, but to reclaim the beautiful things I once buried in fear. The smell of Aunt Eva's apple pie every Saturday, the tickle of wet grass under my feet by the creek, the sound of my own laughter from some long-forgotten day before it vanished. When I was 14, the school organized a writing contest. I hadn't planned to enter, but my literature teacher, Miss Hannah, found a poem I had forgotten inside my notebook. Clara, did you write this? She asked. I nodded. Has anyone ever told you you have a voice worth listening to? I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't used to compliments. They usually came with conditions. Be good and you'll be loved. Stay quiet and you'll be praised. But her eyes, they held no conditions. Only trust. A quiet, gentle trust that made me want to believe in myself. So I submitted a story, a short one titled, The Letter Clara Never Sent. No one knew it was real. They didn't have to. Because for the first time, I wasn't writing to be saved. I was writing because I had already started saving myself. A week later, Miss Hannah called me into her office. On the desk lay a printed version of my story. Simply framed, she said, your story won first prize, but more importantly, you made people feel pain without exposing wounds. That's a gift, Clara. I didn't say anything, just stood there, stunned. Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me. Not with pity, but with respect. It was March. The air had started to soften, and the first daffodils peeked up along the back fence, as if winter's heart had finally stopped sighing. I was still writing, no longer in secret. One of my short stories had been published in the town's newsletter. Just a small section, almost tucked away. But to me, it felt like a door had opened. One afternoon, after returning from the literature club, Mom handed me an envelope. No sender's name. Only a return address. Fairmont, Kentucky. I hesitated. My heart started racing for no reason I could name, like hearing familiar footsteps after years of silence. I opened it. The handwriting leaned slightly to the right, neat and careful. It was from my father. He wrote that he had read my short story, sent to him by an old friend in town. He didn't explain why he left. He didn't apologize. At least, not right away. He just said, "I don't know if you want to hear from the man who's been absent your whole life, but I hope you don't throw this letter away." I didn't throw it away. I read it again and again, like someone listening to a sad song they can't stop playing. He told me he had read every word I wrote, and he realized his daughter was stronger than he had ever imagined. "I'm not writing to fix anything, Clara," he said. "Just to tell you, you've survived something no one should ever face, and I'm proud of you. Even if it's too late, I'm still proud." I didn't know what to feel. Not anger, not forgiveness, just a door, slightly ajar. I didn't write him back. Not immediately. I kept the letter in a drawer, between unfinished drafts and scattered thoughts. But on nights I couldn't sleep, I would take it out, not to reread it, but to remember that once, someone who left still looked back. One day, as I was hanging laundry out back, Mom came and stood beside me. She didn't look at me, just placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "I know, it was a letter from your father," she said. I nodded. "I won't stop you from forgiving him," she continued. "Even though I haven't figured out how." I said nothing. We just stood there, two women who had lost different things, learning how to find peace again. Together. I left the town when I turned 18, with a small suitcase, a stack of handwritten pages, and my mother's whispered blessing on the front porch. Go, Clara. Live a life that darkness can't swallow. I went to the city, where the streets were wider, and the nights somehow longer. I took every job I could to cover tuition, waitressing, shelving books at the library, transcribing notes for others. But every night, I wrote, not secret letters anymore. I wrote short stories, poems, words about fear, silence, and the faint flicker of light at the end of long, dark tunnels. And for the first time, I signed my name at the bottom of the page. One of my literature professors, Mrs. Mason, was the first to call me a writer. "Clara," she said, "your voice is like a delicate string. If someone tugs too hard, they might not feel it at all. But those who listen carefully, they'll realize it reaches deep." I smiled, for the first time in a long while. Not a forced smile, not a mask. Just me. Mrs. Mason submitted one of my stories to a literary magazine. I didn't expect much. I was used to being the reader, not the one being read. But a few months later, I received a letter. "We would like to publish your piece, The Girl Behind the Brick Wall." In our next issue, I cried, alone, in a quiet dormitory hallway, like a child who had just heard her name spoken correctly. After years of silence, after that, I was invited to speak at schools, at community centers, at places I never thought I'd enter. Not to tell tragic stories, but to look into the eyes of kids who were once me and say, "You are not someone's mistake. You are a story still being written, and you have the right to write the ending." I saw my past self in their eyes, lost, but not without hope. And so I told my story, not to forget, but to remember how far I had come. I am now 74. My hair is silver, my hands speckled with age, and my knees complain whenever the weather turns. I live in a small house at the edge of town, where the evenings come early, and the birds sing gently at dawn. Each day, I sit here on this old rocking chair, on the front porch of a wooden house, looking out at the garden William and I tended for over 40 years. He passed away 6 autumns ago, peacefully, the same way he lived. But I still feel him, in the breeze through the curtains, in the scarf he left behind, in the habit of brewing tea at exactly 4 p. Mom. I still write, no longer with blue ink, but with the quiet tapping of an old keyboard, and I still tell stories, to the children at the village school, to strangers who write, telling me my story helped them find their voice, and to myself, to the woman who once believed she would never have a soft ending. Once, after a talk, a young girl came to me. She must have been 15, messy hair, red eyes. She didn't speak much, just held my hand and asked, "How did you make it through?" I was silent for a moment, looked into her eyes, and saw myself curled under a staircase, decades ago. And I said, quietly, I didn't get over it. I walked through it, slowly, trembling. But I didn't stop. Each step was a choice, not to let the darkness be my forever. I'm no hero. I'm a survivor. And in the darkest night, I found a light. Small, but enough to guide me through. Now, each night, I place that light on my porch. A quiet message to the world. If you're lost, walk toward the light. Even if it's just a flicker, it will wait for you. Just like I once waited for myself.